Well, hello everyone, Scott here. This episode is going to be a little bit different because of kind of a confluence of events where I had 3 people lined up, one of them had to back out, and then there was 2. And then while I was chatting with one of the guests, waiting for the second guest to arrive on the recording, we realized he wasn't coming. But as it turns out, the one guest that I did have is someone who has a very interesting life story, kind of a second life story in a way. His name is Alastair Henry, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not going to give the usual intro that kind of tells you what sort of things he's done in life, because he's going to kind of tell us that as we go along. I think he has a really interesting story to tell, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So without further ado, let's hear Alastair's story.
In the old days, people all the time talked, shared stories, told stories. But today we're too busy. We just meet and move on. We don't really delve into anything. So you really don't share. And what we find is after we do that, they're motivated to share their story. And it gets a very rich conversation. And you get to know everybody a lot better because you've shared and bonded. It's almost magical the way it happens.
It's definitely interesting when you learn about somebody else and how different, you're everybody's sort of focused on themselves because, of course, right? You're the main character in your story. But you hear somebody else's and you realize, wow, their experiences are so different than mine. And I think you just sort of assume that everybody kind of has the same type of thoughts and, as you.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. Yeah.
Everybody has a history. We've got a whole lifetime different journey. So you come together and if you can draw on your experiences and share, it's really interesting. So what do you want to do? You want to give him a shout? Or text him?
I sent him a message. He didn't respond. So I think what we should do is we should do just what you were just talking about. We should share some stories with each other and learn about each other, and we'll do that. How about that? I mean, I was looking at your website a little bit, and you have quite the life story.
Yeah, I know. And nothing really happened until I retired. I was like 60. I mean, much older than you.
Sure.
I just led your normal life, family, corporate guy. And then when I retired, because I retired at 57. Because I worked so hard, I was very career-driven, really productive. At the expense of my personal life, I must say. I realize that now, upon reflection. At the time, you don't know that because, you're in that state of mind. You think this is what success is, Mm-hmm. But everything happened after that. And the strange thing was I got a chance to retire to a beautiful place in the country, 50 acres, 5 ponds, 18 acres of bush, lots of nature, a river running through the property with trout in it. Lovely, ideal. But it wasn't satisfying. And I asked myself, is this it?
And why wasn't it satisfying?
I felt empty. I didn't feel fulfilled. I just thought, is this it? All I'm going to do now is play golf and cut grass for the rest of my life. There's got to be more to life than this. And I think the reason, Scott, was because I was so used to being a high achiever.
Yeah.
To actually stop and not achieve anything, it was traumatic. Mm-hmm. I struggled with it for about a year. And as I say, I was asking myself, is this it? Is this all there is? And if I'd have said, yeah, well, Al, you're in a wonderful state. You've got this wonderful retirement. You can just put your feet up. You've earned it. That would have been the end of it. And I wouldn't have known anything else, eh?
Yeah.
But I didn't. I said, no, there's got to be more than this. I need to feel alive, I need a sense of adventure.
Yeah.
And I need to find what fulfills me because, and what I realized later upon reflection was people. That's what I learned, Scott. In the corporate world, I was an accountant. I was a, chartered accountant.
Sure.
It was all about boardrooms, meetings, budgets, reports, all that stuff. Not really. And even my colleagues, they were just colleagues, you know. I didn't have any really deep relationship with any of them. We just went to work.
Yeah, you had lots of acquaintances and
Yeah.
people you were friendly with, but not
Yeah.
close connection, yeah.
So I got thinking about it, and I didn't want to go back into the corporate world. I thought, man, I've been there, done that, you know. Didn't want to go back in the city. I love the country.
Yeah.
So I went to live with a small First Nations band on the east arm of Great Slave Lake in Canada's Northwest Territories.
Yeah, and so First Nations, for people listening who might not know what a First Nations band is, what does that mean?
In Indians, what do you call them?
I mean, so like native people maybe is what you'd
Native
say,
people,
right? Is that-
yeah.
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 That might be another way to say it. Yeah. Some people might call them Indians, sure. Yeah, what they used to call them, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
so sort of a native people, yeah.
Well, in Canada, we've got the native people that we're now called. We recognize. We call them First Nations.
First Nations,
They were here
yeah,
first.
which makes sense. Yeah.
They were here before we got here.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
you've got the Inuit, which we used to call Eskimos, right?
Right. Which are different than the First Nations. The Inuit and the First Nations
Yeah.
are different people. Yeah.
The Inuit live on the north coast, on the Arctic Ocean,
Okay. Yeah.
and they're all to do with seals and whales. They live on the ocean.
Yeah.
The Indians, or the First Nation, live inside Canada, all across.
Sure,
you
that
know.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And you said they came here before us, but clearly from your accent, you came here from somewhere else as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I came from England. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. When you were, what, 19 or something, you said, I think?
yeah. That's right. Yeah, when I was 19.
And then you've been in Canada
All
since
my
then?
life. Yeah.
All your life. Yeah. So you feel like a Canadian now, not a
Oh yeah.
Brit, or what would you consider yourself? Canadian?
Yeah, Canadian. Yeah.
Canadian. But you still got the accent.
Well, it's weird, you know. I picked this accent up when I was 14, 15.
Yeah, and it just stuck with you, yeah.
Yeah, because actually I was born in Scotland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I only went to Bolton, Lancashire, where this is my accent,
Yeah.
when I was 5. So from 5 to 9, I was there for 14 years.
Which I think is typically kind of the age where you sort of
Yeah.
pick up an accent like that. Now, some people,
Yeah.
it'll change when they get older if they move somewhere, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of times a lot of that is that age in there where you're learning to talk well and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, when I go back, I can hardly understand my brother-in-law.
Sure. And they probably think that you don't have a British accent anymore,
Oh no,
right?
they think I'm. Oh no, they hear the Canadian.
You sound yeah,
Weird,
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, but to an American, you sound British, so.
yeah. So I went to this little community, only
Yeah.
300. In Canada, there are 630 different First Nation tribes, if you like. Mm-hmm. And Canada is a big country. Most of them weren't even aware of each other, right? Because they settled somewhere. So they've all got they've got their own culture, dances, songs, myths, creation myths. Anyway, so I went to Lutsoke. I went there to manage their development corporations.
So you kind of went there for a job. This wasn't sort of a random place that you moved to?
No, I was hired.
Yeah, okay.
As the general manager of the development corporations. Diamonds were discovered in 1992 in the Northwest Territories. BHP Billiton was already there. So was Rio Tinto. And part of this job was to help the band negotiate with De Beers some agreements, a participation agreement and a contribution agreement. And that's what really excited me about the position. So I went to Lutsoke. But everybody was so friendly. The thing is, you got 300 people, they're all related. And I was an outsider.
Right. I was going to say, was there any resistance to you coming in as an outsider?
Nah, there was a little bit of discrimination. I mean, I was referred to as whitey, but I wasn't. I didn't bother me, I was the white guy. Yeah, it's okay. But they invited me to their homes for celebrations. Tommy invited me to check out his trap lines one Sunday afternoon. I went fishing with Johnny, and it was wonderful. And that's when I realized, I enjoy people. I am. But I'd been deprived of that.
Yeah.
I went into the corporate world at a very early age as an accountant, and I was just discovering about myself, man, I really enjoy people. And there was things I could do for them, because people in Lutzoke, there was no bank in Lutzoke. There was one grocery store. There wasn't even a coffee shop. There's nothing. And so some of them had bank accounts, but in Yellowknife, but they needed to fly to Yellowknife, and that was like $250, round trip. So you just couldn't go to Yellowknife. So a lot of it in the community was cash.
Mm-hmm. And of course, is this pre-internet? Is this before you can kind of do everything online?
No, but it was early internet,
okay.
And internet was really unstable in
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure so because nowadays it seems like, well, why would you need to go to the bank, right? You could just do everything online with your phone.
Yeah.
But this would have been before you could just easily do everything on your phone. Yeah.
Well, the development corporations hired people. I ran a couple of fire crews out of their fire base up near the airport. And other people I sent on planes to the mines as janitors, catering staff. Yeah. So I had payrolls. So one of the things it just happened. I bought a tent and some sleeping bags in Yellowknife for somebody. And I said, okay, no problem. I'll just take it out of your pay, okay?
Sure.
Payroll deduction. I mean, I couldn't. It was a no-brainer. Well, then other people came and said, hey, can you do that? Can you do that? And I realized, I can help people. I have something specific. They don't have a Visa card. I do. That's powerful. And when I helped them, that's when I thought, this is where my fulfillment comes from. And I was helping them in other ways, just with advice and. And the other thing is, I went into Lutzoke as this businessman, with all these best business practices, that didn't work up there. Because although they were Canadian, it was like a different world. It was like going to the moon. Totally different culture. They'd never been conditioned in the sort of North American mindset. They just lived in the moment. They didn't worry about next week. They didn't worry. They just took it all in their stride. Whatever, whatever seemed to be their philosophy. And I loved it, and I realized that in the corporate world, I was always multitasking. I never really stopped and enjoyed anything. I was always so busy. I had a meeting 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Joe's coming in, and I got to do this. I got to write this report. And I realized I was just going through the motions for most of my life in the corporate world without really savoring. And here were these simple people, they just lived in the moment. A good, beautiful day, they decided what to do. Like I'd line up some guys for work on Friday, and Friday had come and they wouldn't be there. I said, I'm working on my snow machine. So I would just drive around town, rolling my window down and say, hey, Bill, you want to work today? And Bill would need some money. I'd say, okay, hop in. He'd jump in the back. And I always found what I needed, It's weird.
Yeah.
And I remember Kenny said to me, he said, the difference between you and me, Al? You live off your paycheck. I live off the lands. And I said, yeah, that's so true, Kenny. And the other thing would be, like at the beginning of the day, I was, here's the objectives. This is what we're going to accomplish today, Here's the expectations. And then at the end of the day, I have a little wrap up, I'd say, well, it was a good day, but we didn't do this. And they'd look at me and say, why are you talking about what we didn't do? Why is that important if we didn't do it? I say, you got a point. So from that point on, there was no regrets about what we didn't do. And it was made it so much happier and lighter and joyful, weird.
And you may have gotten less done with that approach, but does it matter?
Yeah.
Who
cares?
Yeah, probably not.
So I had these contracts from the government, from the Canadian government, to run these fire crews. We had a little fire station, a little base up near the airport. And we hired 2 crews of 8, 16 people. And so we're going to start like next Monday. So I'm having this meeting with them and I'm saying, okay, here's the deal, guys, We get paid on the 1st and the 15th, okay? Okay. Well, the day after, the first day of employment, someone came into my office and said, can we get an advance? It's like, you got to be joking. I'm not going to give you an advance. Everybody's going to want an advance, right? Get out of here. So a couple of days ago, then they come back and say, we're really out of diapers for the little guy. And there was so beseeching stories that I started to make exceptions.
Uh-huh.
And then it dawned on me, I thought, they've worked, they've earned the money. Who am I to say I'm not going to pay you till the 1st and the 15th? What gives me the right to say that?
Mm-hmm.
That's just an administrative thing from my world, where we don't pay, So, the only problem was, though, the co-op only had so much money, like the co-op store.
Sure. Right.
So when they got checks, they took them to the co-op store to be cashed. Otherwise, they're left with these checks
that are kind of worthless otherwise, right?
They can't get to the bank in Yellowknife, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So I started to bring in huge amounts of cash. And I had it in my office, And when they couldn't get the check cashed, I'd say, okay, Joel, leave the check with me, okay? Can you come back at 4 o'clock? Well, then I'd put the money in an envelope and whatever. And I say, yeah, I just happen to be able to do this today.
Right. This is the only money I have, right? Yeah.
I didn't want everybody to know I had a lot of money.
Right, of course not, yeah.
Well, even bringing it in on the plane was a bit of a risk,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I had to get people I trusted to go to the bank and bring in a satchel. Anyway, cut a long story short, after 2 years in Lutzoke, I thought this, I'm not going to be here for the rest of my life. I'm not Denny. I'm not an Indian,
Sure,
But it felt like a long time. I couldn't even remember what I did before I went there, Time, it's such a strange concept, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
But I thought, okay, what I want to do is really help people. So I went to Dhaka, Bangladesh. I volunteered with a small NGO in Dhaka, Bangladesh, setting up microcredit programs in rural villages and coastal villages, and I was there for 2 years.
So how'd you end up going, like, why there of all places? How'd you end up at Bangladesh, right? I mean, there's the world's big.
Well, somebody told me about an organization out of England called VSO. Okay. Volunteer Service Overseas. And somebody said, I think they'd be interested in your background. So I contacted them, applied, and they said, oh, I'd love to have you. How about, would you like to go to Dhaka, Bangladesh? And I didn't care where I went. It was, it was an adventure.
Did you know anything about Bangladesh really before you went there? Had you been there before?
Oh God, no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I kind of vaguely know where it is. That's about the extent of my knowledge. So yeah,
I was 62 when I went there, and then they said, "But you have to learn to speak Bangla." They tell me this after I arrive, right? I thought, you've got to be joking, So I went to all these lessons, but they were all interrupted because there were strikes and protests, and I only attended about half the lessons. But it was okay because where I was working in Dhaka, they were learning English, and they wanted me to speak English. But I could still remember some. Bangla it's a simpler language.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah. Balo means good, you know.
Balo means good. Okay, there you go. Now
Balo,
I know some
yeah.
Bangladesh.
Yeah, so when I went to work, everybody would say, Kemonishen. How are you? Kemonishen. Really means how is it going, you know.
Sure, yeah.
You pass one desk, they say, Kemonishen. In Canada, we say lots of stuff. You know, what's up? How's it going? But everybody just said, Kemonishen. And my answer was, Ami Balo Achi. Ami Balo Achi. I'm fine. And they smiled.
Yep.
It was really funny, yes. I had a good time.
Yeah, sounds like it. So you made lots of good connections there as well, it sounds like,
Yeah.
with people?
I learned a lot. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a real experience because I had to flag down a rickshaw to take me to work, you know.
Sure,
I
yeah.
lived at the same level as so I learned to be very minimalist. I had to learn
sure, yeah.
live at the same level, really. And even the washroom, you know, there was no toilet bowl there. There's a bloody hole in, and I had to squat.
So this is a far cry from your 50 acres with 5
yeah.
ponds, and I mean quite.
other
And this has
extreme.
only been a couple years difference, right? I mean, you were a couple of years in the First Nations, and then
Yeah.
So that must have been a big shock.
But you know, with an open mind, I was thriving on adventure. It's like, bring it on, you know.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
I realized, man, how little you need to live. And, you know, okay, it's, you know. So I did. I mean, I learned to squat and have a poo. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just
Sure.
became normal after a while. That's weird.
Interesting. And so how long were you in Bangladesh then?
For 2 years.
2 years there too. Okay. Yeah, and then decided to move on because you weren't going to stay there forever, just like the First
It was a 2-year
Nations
contract.
place.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a 2-year contract. Okay, so they were done with you. They wanted to get rid. No.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I did my job. A lot of those things, they get funding.
Right. Yeah. So it was funded for a couple of years, and then
Yeah. And then that's it. So I came back to Canada, and I should have been going to Rwanda. That was my next assignment, to a hospital
Okay.
in Rwanda.
With the same
Wow.
organization, or
Yeah.
okay.
Anyway, there was another situation. My daughter wanted to go back to school. It's tragic. She'd lost her husband. He fell down some steps, cracked his head,
Ooh,
went into a coma and died.
yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, and she had 3 children.
Okay, yeah,
And she wanted somebody. She wanted to go back to school because she said, "I've got to provide." She was a stay-at-home mom, but now she realized she has to go and provide for her family. But she was concerned because she had a 1-year-old, Beckett, and he was listed in daycare centres, but there was no room. He was on a wait list.
right, yeah.
And I could see how important it was to her. So I said, "No problem, Nikki. I'll just cancel the Rwanda thing and I'll look after Beckett." So I became this caregiver. So I looked after her 3 children while she went to school.
Was that a bit of a shock? Having, I mean, you'd raised kids before, but it'd been a while since you'd had a little one, right? That you had to take care of all the time. Was that a bit of an adjustment?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I mean, my youngest is just about to turn 11, and I still feel like, man, if I was taking care of a baby every day, that would be a bit of a shock for me, and it's only been, not that long, so, yeah.
Well, Beckett was 1. That's right. I was changing his diapers, giving him his bottle.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one thing to have your grandkids come and, visit. It's another thing to be in charge of a baby every day, all day long. Yeah, for sure.
So, of course, I have a very special bond with him,
Well, yeah, of course.
And he's at university now, actually, in Hamilton. Yeah. So, anyway, I volunteered. There was an organisation in London that made connections for people. So I went there and I said, "Look, I got some time. I'm interested in volunteering. What have you got, And they said, "Well, the North West London Resource Centre is looking for volunteers." So I went there. And I walked in there, and the executive director was this lady called Candace Whitlock, who became my partner.
So how old were you at that time then?
64.
64, okay. Yep.
Anyway, cut a long story short, I went on the board at the Northwest London Resource Centre. I went on as treasurer, I became the chairman, and then Nikki, she'd finished her schooling. I said, okay, what else have you got? So they were going to send me to Indonesia, to an island called Flores. So I was all set to go to Flores. I resigned from the board.
Mm-hmm.
Candace invited me as a guest to a wedding of a friend of theirs, and that was our first date, if you like.
Yeah.
Anyway, Candace liked what I'd done in Dhaka, in Bangladesh,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a very special woman. And she said, well, that's what I want to do. She sold her house. She sold up everything. And she joined me,
Wow.
and we went to Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica, for a year.
Yeah.
Same thing. She got a position. I got a position.
Yeah.
She was working with the youth, and yeah. And then we went to Guyana for a year. Same thing. Yeah. And when we came back to Canada, we were homeless people, right?
Because you'd sold everything and gone. Yeah.
So we used to just move in with our kids, And we thought, well, that's not right. You can't just show up. And I said, well, how long are you going to be home, Dad? I said, I don't know. I said, till I get another assignment. So we decided this isn't fair,
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to go backpacking.
More adventure, right?
So we went to Central America for 4 months. Yeah. Little backpacked. Weighed 20 pounds. Shows you how little you need. You roll up your T-shirts, roll up your underwear. That's all.
Yeah, yep. The rolling is the trick. That's the way to do
yeah,
it. Yep.
Yeah, you just stick it all in, one on top of the other. Huh?
My wife and I did a 2-week trip to Italy a few years ago for our anniversary, and we only took carry-on bags for a 2-week trip, and so we had to do the rolling, and we had to really say, okay, what do we actually need to take? We don't need nearly as much as we think we do,
No.
So,
No.
yeah, it was great.
Oh, yeah, I bet. You going to go again somewhere?
So, for sure. So that was our 15th anniversary, and this year was our 20th, and we actually did a 2-week trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park down Tennessee and North Carolina and that this year. So that was
Beautiful.
good too. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We like to hike and, go do adventures and stuff. And yeah.
Anyway, we spent 4 months.
Yeah.
Just backpacking. It was just a backpack. It wasn't even a rollie or anything.
And where were you backpacking at?
Well, we flew to San Jose, Costa Rica.
Okay.
Then we went into Panama.
Okay.
And then we went into Nicaragua. So we were 4 months, yeah. And then when I was in the north of Nicaragua, this opportunity to go to Guyana on an assignment for a year came up. So we came back to Canada. Went to Guyana, did our 1-year assignments in Georgetown, Guyana. When that was up, came back to Canada. And then we went to Southeast Asia. So we went through, really weird.
Yeah, you're racking up the frequent flyer miles here. So where in Southeast Asia did you go?
Well, we flew first of all to Bangkok, and the intention was to spend the first month in Thailand. But man, it was raining so hard when we got to Bangkok, and they said it's going to be like this all week. So we just went down the aisle at the airport looking at regional airlines, what's cheap, and there's a really cheap flight to Denpasar, Bali.
Okay.
So we took that. So our first month was in Bali. Second month we were in Vietnam, then we were in Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and we came home.
Wow. It's quite the adventure.
Oh, yeah. But all the time we were writing too, Scott.
Right. Yeah, right. You've got some books, right? Yeah.
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 When I went, let's go right back. When I went to Lutzel Cay, my daughter, who's Beckett, I looked after. Huh? When I went to Lutzel Cay, she gave me this really nice leather journal. I said, I want you to write in this, Dad, because we know it's going to be really strange up there. We want to know what it's like. So I wrote in the journal, basically out of a sense of obligation, because I knew Nicky would be saying, how's the writing coming, Dad? And I didn't want to say, I'll get round to it. So I started writing. But there was so much happening, Scott. So much happening. I was writing. Every night I was writing. Well, it didn't take me long to finish the journal. And then I was writing in notebooks. So when I left after 2 years, I had like 8 notebooks. And I thought, man, I can't just turn these over and say, here you go, Nicky. This is what you wanted. I thought,
Yeah, have fun reading all
they're
this.
They're not readable, yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought,
because then she's going to read it. You were writing out of obligation, and she's going to read it out of obligation.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I was writing every night, on an actual basis in real time.
Yeah, so that ends up being a lot of stuff, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was on 350,000 words or something.
Yeah. So you cut it down and turned it into a book then? Or
Well, what I did is when I came out of there, I thought, okay, I got to condense this into something readable, So I thought what I'll do is I'll take a month. I'll go to a place in the world somewhere. So I went to a little place called Coweta.
Where's that at?
South part of Costa Rica on the border with Panama.
Sure.
I just picked it out.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Just
I don't
randomly? Or
Yeah. I don't know what made me pick it out. But I got a nice guest cabin for a month. I went in there with my computer, and every day I just typed all the stuff into Word. So once it was all into Word, I started to, reread it, and I thought a lot of stuff didn't go anywhere. So I deleted it. I realized, man, I got to condense this, to maybe 100,000 words, not 350. So I got to get rid of stuff. But there was little bits that was part of a story that led somewhere, There was developments going on. So I kept those bits and got rid of the other bits. But the weird thing, what happened, Scott, as I was doing this, I realized how I had changed over the 2 years. It's weird.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because in the very beginning, when people came to me and said, can you, like I would write, Joe came to see me today. He asked me, could I help him? I told him no. I said, I'm not your personal counselor, I'm a businessman.
Right.
Leave
that's
me
not
alone.
my job.
Go away.
Yeah.
And then after 2 years, it's like, hi, Joe, how can I help you today? Because I realized, working with people, and they've been so friendly to me. And what I realized, Scott, was the joy of community. 300 people. So you haven't got subdivisions. It looks okay. Yeah, you just got one. And it's just one big community with a community hall. And by necessity, they all do things as a community. And I realized I don't have that. I never had. In Canada, we're all alone. I come out, I say hi to my neighbor, go to work, and he's never in my house.
Well, and when you had 50 acres, you didn't even say hi to a neighbor because you probably never saw a neighbor.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've got 2 acres here, and I still feel like I hardly ever see a neighbor, but...
Iowa, it was lovely, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that book, that journal, as I got rid of everything, right? So I got it down to a story about what happened to me when I went to Lutzoke and when I flew out. I called that book White Man on the Land.
Nice.
And I gave it to people to read, and they really thought it was really interesting. But they said, the reader is left wanting to know more about who was this man that went to Lutzoke and what did he do afterwards with his newfound knowledge.
Right, you're just getting a little snippet of all of that life, yeah.
So I carried on writing. So I kept a journal when I went to Bangladesh. Anyway, cut a long story short, we were thinking about a lot of people. They retire, and we knew a lot of people, and they said, wow, you must be so brave and courageous. I thought, well, no. They just retire and play golf, and that's fine. But we thought it's good the world needs volunteers. We need people to share, and especially retirees. I mean, they got a whole lifetime. of acquiring skills and knowledge.
You've got lots of skills, you've got lots of experience, you've got the time to invest in things. You've got, I mean, I'm assuming since you had 50 acres with 5 ponds and all this stuff, you had the money to be able to, invest the time.
But it was never about the money. It was
Well,
never
right,
about
but
the
I mean,
money. Yeah.
But if you, you were able to go do these things and not necessarily need to keep working for a salary like you had been for years or whatever. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So we decided to write this book to encourage retirees to consider volunteering. Not in Bangladesh, but even in their local communities.
Yeah. So my dad actually is retired, and one of the things he does is I think 3 days a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he goes and drives a truck and picks up, they go to the grocery stores and the Walmart, and they pick up all of the old food that they're going to throw away, and then they deliver it to food banks and these kind of places.
Man, that's wonderful.
So he's helping, supply the food banks and get rid of some of the food waste. And I mean, that's like 3 days a week. He spends, I don't know, a couple hours. I'll call him sometimes and he's like, hey, I'm out driving around making my pickups. What do you need?
But I bet you he feels so fulfilled doing that. He probably enjoys just knowing that he's helping.
And again, the connections with people as well as helping. He's got the other guys that do the deliveries with them, and I'm sure it's the same people a lot of times at the places where he's picking up and dropping off. And he's making those connections with people as well. Yeah, and helping his community.
I think it's getting better, Scott. I think more and more people are volunteering now. But at one time, I know they were really. Everybody was crying out for volunteers. Yeah. Anyway, so that's why. So we wrote this book. It's called "Go For It." It's true.
I like it. I like the title. Yeah. So far, you're 2 for 2 on titles, I think.
Volunteering adventures on roads less traveled, and
Nice.
a lot of people have read the book and find them really, really interesting, because we had a very minimalist view of the world. Almost Buddhist type, we just unconditionally accept what happens. We don't get upset. If it happens, it happens. And there were, lots of sort of little wrinkles.
Of course, I mean.
Yeah, we just moved on,
Yeah. I mean, what can you do? You just gotta adapt and you can't sit and whine and complain about the thing that didn't work. That doesn't get you anywhere, right?
I know, but most people's reaction is to immediately blame.
Oh, yeah.
You blame somebody, and then why me? And then, but it's no good bringing negative emotions into it. It doesn't change anything. You just hurt yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, for a while there, what we did is when we got back from backpacking, we decided we put these little PowerPoint shows on. And we became entertainers. So we went to retirement homes, community centres, sharing our journeys, our books, and it was a way to sell our books too. So we did that for about 5 years. So when I came back, I started to write in 2016 a novel that was been in my head, based on early childhood memories. Because I realized the world had changed a lot since I was a kid, really.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, when I grew up in Bolton, Lancashire, there was World War II vets with the PTSD, shell shock.
Right.
And there was no mental health help, They just wandered the streets. They were crazy. Kids were frightened of them because they were so weird, stuff like that. Anyway, I started writing a book. But January 2019, over Christmas, I was having trouble breathing. I was gasping for air. I'd been a pack-a-day smoker all my life.
Oh, yeah.
And I just figured I had lung cancer, and I thought that's the way I'm going to die, Because I was really addicted. I tried to quit, never could. And I thought, well, I'm 75, had a good life. And I thought, well, no, as I say, I accepted what was. I thought,
No sense blaming, right?
No, I just blame myself.
Like we said, you just
Yeah.
accept.
So I was put on oxygen immediately, 24/7. I had an oxygen unit in my bedroom. I went to bed with a cannula up my nose. 24/7 I had to breathe in this oxygen,
Yeah.
And what it was, I was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, not lung cancer. I was surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with all the smoking, you would just assume that, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's got a high morbidity. From the onset, you've got 3 to 5 years. So I said, well, what have I got? Like, have I got 3 years? I got 5 years? It makes a big difference because there's things I want to do,
Right.
And they said, well, unfortunately, Al, in your case, the fibrosis is quite advanced. You're looking at 18 months tops.
Oh, wow.
And this is January 2019. So this gave me like
So spoiler alert, it's been more than 18 months now and you're talking to us still.
well, that was a best before date, right, of June 2020.
Right.
So I thought, okay, what do you want to do? Well, there's one thing I wanted to do was to go back to England, say goodbye to my sister, my nieces, nephews, all my family, because I came out by myself. So they're all in England, France. They all came up. So I went back to England with Candace, my 3 children, and 3 of my grandchildren. So there was 8 of us, and we went back for 2 weeks. So it was wonderful. Came back to Canada. But at this time, I realized my fibrosis is progressing because I used to be on 3 liters a minute. Then it went to 5, now 7, 8, 9, 10, And I could see the 6 months coming up, And I went through this mindset. It's really weird, last Christmas, last Thanksgiving, last time I visit these people, all these lasts. But I was savoring them, knowing that they're my last, And it was weird. In a way, I was joyful about it because I just thought, well, at least I know. It'd be terrible if you were just knocked down by a truck or something and,
Sure.
departed this earth. So it gave me time to prepare, to say goodbye, and I was going through the process. I was in charge, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So I accepted this reality with my Buddhist philosophy, unconditional acceptance. But my children didn't. They didn't share.
Right.
They said, no, Dad,
Right.
that's not acceptable. How about a transplant? Well, the doctor never mentioned a transplant, the possibility. So I asked him, I said, well, what about a transplant? He said, well, you're over the age of 70. Usually they don't
Right.
do transplants because people over the age of 70 have other issues.
Right, and it doesn't make sense to go through the process of doing a transplant and if it's not gonna extend their life that much more, right?
Well, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be eligible. Like if I had prostate cancer, any form of cancer, I'm not eligible.
Right.
And if I had any heart problems, so I had to have an angioplasty. This is where they put a thing in, it goes all the way into your heart, and it's measured. I got a graph. It's wonderful. It shows you the bloodstream and where there's little bumps. But hey, everything was fine. So amazing. So I was eligible. So I went on the wait list in June. July I got a call. They said, come in, we have some lungs. So went up the 2 hours to Toronto, went in there, got prepped. And then they said, unfortunately, the lungs just aren't good enough. So you have to go home. Same thing happened in August. And the same thing happened again in September.
Oh, no.
So went in there, got prepped. And they said, yeah, no, everything looks good. The surgery will be at 4:30 in the morning. So have a good sleep. We'll come in and wake you up. Well, at 3 o'clock, they came in and they said, sorry, but the lungs just aren't good enough. So you'll be going home again, okay? So go back to sleep. So when I woke up in the morning, I'm getting dressed, ready to come home. Candace was at a hotel. She came over and And then they said, wait, some more lungs just shown up, and they look promising.
It's like we found some spare lungs
I
in
know.
the back or something.
Can you hang on for an hour while we check them out? I said, well, sure, I'm not going anywhere, you know.
I'll be here all day if you need me to be. Yeah, I mean.
So they came back and said, everything's great. 4:30 this afternoon, you go into the operating theatre. So in September 2020, went into hospital, came out with my new lungs. That's over 3 years ago.
Which is kind of a crazy time to be going to hospital and getting a procedure done too, right? During COVID. Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
So 2 new lungs, right? Double lung transplant?
Yeah. Anyway, here I am.
Yeah. So, I mean, any further issues? Has it been good? You're not using oxygen, I see. So.
Oh, God, no. Everything's
all
wonderful.
good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it like an immediate, just like totally better right away? Was there kind of a gradual thing, or how quickly does that?
Yeah, it's really, well, so it was a 12-hour operation. They do one lung at a time.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think of that 12 hours, man, that's a long shift for all that.
Long time,
those
yeah.
people in the operating theatre there, Anyway, I was in ICU for 2 days.
Okay.
And then you come out and you're in step down because you got these tubes, you have to drain everything because they break the
Sternum. Yeah.
the sternum, take out your old lungs, put your new lungs in, connect everything just like a plumber,
Isn't it amazing that they can do that? I mean,
I know.
Yeah.
There's arteries and all sorts of stuff.
Oh yeah, there's so many little intricate things. Yeah.
I know.
You think working on a car is difficult? I can't imagine.
So then I was in a thing called step down, and that's like anyway, after step down, they take the tubes out, and so now I'm in a regular ward, but now I got to start walking around, with the IV. Yeah, get some exercise. And 6 days later, they discharged me. I was so surprised. And they said, no, hospitals are for sick people. You're not sick.
Yeah.
We're all full of germs and viruses here. Go home.
Right.
We're safe.
Wow, amazing. And that's been a few years ago now, right?
3.
3 years ago. Yeah. Okay. Wow. It's interesting. One of our previous episodes that we did, we talked about what would the world be like if extra lives were a real thing, like they are in video games, how you can earn an extra life, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of what happened to you. You you were doing your last Christmas and you're
yeah.
Yeah, you kind of got an extra life now.
Yeah. On so many levels too, Scott. As I say, I started writing this book.
Yeah.
But I stopped writing because what's the point, Number one, I can't finish it. I don't have time to finish it and publish it and all that, I just thought, But then I started writing again, so I was able to finish my book. Mm-hmm. And it's on Amazon, and it's published. People are reading it. I think, well, that wouldn't have come into existence had I not had the transplant. It wouldn't have a life of its own.
And of course, from the Christian perspective, we might say, there was more that you needed to do. You weren't, your time wasn't up yet, right?
Well, I believe that in a way, but, I'm not a Christian.
Different way than me, I understand,
yeah. Yeah, just a different aspect, yeah. I still believe that I was given the gift of life to do something with. So I'm an advocate for... So in Canada, I don't know about in the States, in Ontario, every 3 days, somebody dies on the wait list because there's just not enough organs being donated.
Which is why they don't give them to people that have other complications,
exactly.
Of course, because it's not. If we had a room full of extra lungs in the back, then they just give them to everybody that needed them. But yeah, because they're limited, that's the problem. Yeah,
and not enough people in Canada. You have to register to donate your organs and tissues, otherwise they won't take your organs and tissues.
It's the same way here in the United States, yeah. Yep. In fact, when you get your driver's license, you say whether you want to be an organ donor, and then they put that on there.
Well, that used to be, but it didn't really work, Scott. I mean, what we have as we've gone digital. It's beadonor.ca.
Sure.
We want people to go up and register because now it's on their health. Because what happens in a traffic accident, they race everybody in, you're in the operating room, they know who the person is, but man, maybe they can't find a driver's license.
Sure,
You know.
right, that makes sense. Well, and I'm sure that the information is probably online as well for us. I'm sure they have an electronic record of that somewhere, but yeah. But what's your say that website again?
It's called beadonor.ca, Canada.
Beadonor.ca. Okay. Well, I'll include a link to that in the show notes, so
Okay.
people should go to that and check that out.
Yeah, I could send you that too. So what I'm doing, I'm an advocate to encourage people. Now in Canada, a lot of younger people don't register, and I'm sure it's the same in the States, because they don't think they're going to die, right?
Right.
They don't
That's
want to think about that.
that's something for old people that are going to
Oh
die.
yeah, but there's also this. I'm not going to attract death by signing
Right.
an organ donor
I've heard
card.
people say that. I don't believe this, but I've heard people say that, you shouldn't sign up to be an organ donor because they're not going to try as hard to save you if they know you're an organ donor. Okay, no, that's bogus.
And you got these myths. So what we're doing? The Toronto General Hospital is the only hospital in Ontario. There's 5 in Canada that do lung transplants. Other hospitals do kidney, pancreas, liver, different things.
Sure.
But Toronto General Hospital, it's a 1-hour show. It's a Zoom link to schools, to grade 12 schools all over Ontario. So a doctor or a nurse does the first half hour about the importance of organ tissue donation and dispelling all of these myths, like you mentioned, And then the other half is me. And I come on to with my transplant journey and to inspire people to say, look, had somebody not signed that card, that register, I wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't have written my book, and I wouldn't be, just to try to inspire people, to motivate them to sign.
Yeah, you wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be able to tell people to then sign up to help more people. Like it's a circle there. You wouldn't have been here to tell people to sign up to help other people that wouldn't then be here. Yeah.
And I wouldn't be doing these podcasts with sharing my books and my experience, my life experiences, And that's really interesting because I've been on a lot of different podcasts, all with different themes.
Well, and this wasn't what I was planning on talking about today, but this has been great. It's very interesting. I was actually kind of thinking about what we should talk about, and with the other, there was originally going to be 2 other people on here, and then one couldn't make it, and then I don't know what happened to the other one, and I was originally thinking about it, and I thought in my head, man, it'd almost be good just to let Alastair tell his story because it sounds so interesting. So it kind of worked out. I was kind of thinking that would be good anyways, but yeah.
But, it's amazing, Scott. I can go back to when I was cutting grass and saying, is this it? Is this all I want to do? And people were saying, you've got it made. Like you're golfing 3 times a week. God, that's why we work all our lives to do that.
Right. And I'm sure you weren't, when you got to retirement, were you thinking, oh, this isn't going to be great? Were you like, yes, I've been doing all this work for years. Now I'm getting to where I'm going for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure you weren't. I know some people when they're retiring, they're like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do, and they're unsure. But I get the impression you thought this was, okay, I'm on to the next stage. I'm going to relax and golf.
I bought into that whole thing about being successful.
Right.
And being successful was working your ass off, putting money away, retiring early, and then reaping your reward.
I mean, when you first retired, you probably enjoyed it for a while. Your 50 acres and your ponds and your golfing. So how long did it take before you kind of thought, well, this has been fun?
About 2 years. Yeah.
About 2 years, yeah.
About 2 years, yeah.
It's kind of like a long vacation, and you start thinking, okay, well, this has been great, but I got to get back to the real world now, right?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't feel part of the real world because I'd been such a high achiever. I thought, I worked all my life. I got all these skills and experience. Like, for what? To play golf? I mean, I'm not using it. What a waste. And I felt unfulfilled, you know. So the thing was, I started to realize that, you know, what I really wanted to be in life was to be happy, not successful. And the weird thing was, Scott, on a number of occasions, so when I went to Lutzelkay, you know, I saw those people, they just live in the moment, they're happy. Mm-hmm. And when I went to Bangladesh, I mean, man, 170 million people everywhere. Oh, it's teeming with people. Oh, and yet, people are whistling, they're singing, and how can this be? How can they be happy when they got nothing? And the real key thing was, one time I was in a public washroom in Dhaka, and these public washrooms are so gross. Oh man, they're all concrete, everything's concrete. Smell to high heaven. And there was a guy there with a mopping the floor, and he was whistling. And I thought, yeah, how can he whistle?
He must be insane, right?
Yeah. And I realized he has a job.
Yeah.
And they just accept what is. In North America, right from the get-go, we're told to be competitive, to win, compete, be the first. Yeah? It's all about, and I bought into that. So that's what I realized, you know, happiness is a state of mind. It's not what you have, it's how you, and those people just accept reality, and community is very big for them. That's where they get the happiness from. The brothers, the sisters, the older, you know, grandparents are looking after the babies. The grandparents aren't in retirement residences. They're looking after the babies. There's not enough money, right? But it makes for a nice family, cohesive unit. And I thought, you know, we miss out on that because we don't have a sense of community, in my world anyway, back in Ontario. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had lots of, you know, aha moments like that, realizing things about life. Yeah.
And it took you, you know, it took you a long time to realize that. But, you know, if you hadn't done all that hard work and then retired and had that revelation, would you have ever learned that?
No.
You know what I mean? Like, you kind of had to do the wrong thing in order to learn what the right thing was, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, your whole life is interconnected, eh? And
Yeah.
I don't regret
Sure.
anything, because had anything been different, the rest of it wouldn't have been.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't have happened the way it did. So you've just got to be thankful that everything happened to get you to this point where you are.
And all of your experiences as an accountant and in the, you know, world probably helped you a lot with being able to then, you know, help the people in the First Nations
absolutely.
community and the microloans thing and the other places.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure all of your experience then made you better able to help people in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of, so I'm, you know, I haven't had as much experience as you. I'm sure all things will change for me as I get older too.
That's right. You've got lots of years left.
Right. I still got lots to learn too. But, you know, I went to school for engineering. I have an engineering degree. And then I never worked as an engineer.
No.
I couldn't get a job as an engineer in the town we were living in, and I was working temp jobs, and I went back to school at nights and got a paralegal degree. And I did that for a few years. And then when we moved, it just didn't work out for me to do that job. And so I now have these 2 degrees, and I'm working part-time as the worship leader at a church. And, you know, doing the YouTube and the podcast, and I'm not doing anything related to my degrees.
Isn't that funny?
But all that stuff that I learned, you know, engineering stuff, but also just how to learn, right? Like, I had to learn how to learn by going to college. That's part of it. And all the stuff that I learned from the actual engineering classes, paralegal classes, how to write briefs, how to do these things, has then helped me be successful in these other things that I'm doing now, even though they're not really related. So
No, but you take it all with you, you know.
Yep.
Nothing is a waste of time. Everything is experience, you know.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I say I have 2 degrees that I'm not using, but I kind of am. You know,
Yeah.
I'm using all of the stuff that I learned.
And it's
Yeah.
amazing later in life, I'm sure, other opportunities will pop up, and you'll say, "Oh yeah, I can use that." Like when we were in Guyana, I was working with 10 young people. It was called the Young Leaders of Agricola. Agricola was a little town outside Georgetown, very troubled, damaged community. And I was working with these 10 people from 16 to about 22, but they were in school, or they were in work, they were working. But my volunteer sending organization said, we don't want you going in there at night. In fact, taxi drivers would go to the outskirts. They wouldn't go in. They dropped you off. It was so. But I went in because I forget his name now. Anyway, the first time I went there, he took me around town and he introduced me to everybody. And he said, "This is Alastair. He's come to help us, and we want you to look out for him." Okay? So I felt comfortable. After that, I didn't have a problem. But my volunteer sending organization said, no, you can't go in there. They were thinking about liability. You can't go in.
Oh, yeah,
anyway,
sure.
cut a long story short, I finished my assignment, which was 9 months. And Candace was still working on her 12-month. So I was an accompanying partner. And then another opportunity came up to go into the Amazon rainforest to teach people. What happened was there was 4 eco lodges in the rainforest, and they'd all been given computers. Some organization somewhere had come up with computers, and it was loaded. They were all loaded. Microsoft Word was on there, Microsoft Office. But nobody has shown them how to do anything.
Right. No, you can't just give someone a computer. They got to know how to use it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that project. But now they needed somebody to go in for 4 days and do a little bit of training on Word and Excel. So I had that background. So I got the opportunity to do this most wonderful, exciting adventure in the rainforest. But as you say, you take it with you, and you never know when you're going to use it.
Yeah, you never know when something's going to come in handy later, for sure. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, very cool. Well, I mean, you basically spent a lifetime learning and getting experience, and now you're spending another lifetime using all those experiences.
And sharing, trying to make the world a better place. Happiness is something every single one of us on the planet want. That's what we need. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be successful. We want to be happy. If success leads to happiness, wonderful. But so I looked at all these people in Bangladesh, with no aspirations. They were a rickshaw operator, they went home from work, and they were happy with their family. There was no expectation of more. And I find in my world, it's always about it's never enough. It's sad, but it's never enough. And you leave the woods and you can look at the forest as a unit. And I was comparing my culture to their culture, different values, worldviews.
It'd be interesting to take someone from their culture, have them come and experience yours, and see what things they learn from your culture, right? I mean, you're learning these things going to their culture, but it's not because necessarily theirs is great and yours is bad, right? There's probably things they can learn from your culture as well. It'd be interesting to know the other direction.
In Canada, Scott, we have, some of the Inuit and the North American Indians, they do come to the city, but a high proportion of them can't cope.
Yeah.
And they turn to drugs and the homeless and everything. It's just, they're too stressed out. They just can't. I mean, we condition people, our children from babies, so they grow up in this world. It's their own reality. But when you come in from a different reality.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to adapt. And that's, in some ways, that's one of the things that you probably did learn growing up in the culture that you did and working is the ability to adapt and adjust to a new situation, right? Like you said, the people in that community that they wake up that day and what am I going to do today?
Yeah.
And they're not adapting to a big change, right? They're not necessarily conditioned to adapt
Yeah.
and adjust their world.
But that's the thing, it
to the
looks
world, so-
okay. There's no Walmart, there's no Home Depot or Lowe's.
Right.
They all fish, lots of fish, caribou, and so they eat a lot of wild meat, a lot of berries, cranberries, blueberries. I mean, and they've got money. I mean, they do order groceries. They do go to the co-op and get stuff, but they're not as.
But it's not like what we think of as
No, it's more
groceries and stuff.
minimalist. Yeah, it's more minimalist. And when I learned to be minimalist, I realized less is more. It really is. Because when I sold up everything, I felt so light and free. I didn't need all that stuff. I mean, I had 50 acres, but man, I was on the tractor for about 3 or 4 days a week cutting the grass. Like, for
Yeah.
what? Why?
Right.
I was so much, there's better ways to spend your time. That was the thing. But when I was looking at it before that, I thought, oh, that's wonderful, 50 acres and a river and all this. But it's just a lot of work. For what?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I mean, thank you so much for telling us your story. This was very interesting. I think I learned a lot. You learned a lot. That's the whole point of your story, right? Is that you learned a lot. So, yeah. And your website is just your name, alastairhenry.com. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll put a link to your website in the show notes as well, so people can find out that. And I'm sure links to all your books are on your site there. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
if people go there, they can find all that.
And they can read about organ donation.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing with us. I appreciate it.
My
It
pleasure.
wasn't what we were expecting. Thank you for being adaptable and adjusting to what we were.
It was meant to be, Scott.
Yeah, it was. It was, because this is actually the second time that we had people cancel when you were supposed to be on with them. So, yeah, I guess it was supposed to be this way. Yep. Very cool.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thanks. Go have a good
Okay.
lunch, and I'll
Thank you.
talk to you again.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
These public washrooms are so gross. Oh man, smell to high heaven. And there was a guy there with a mop, mopping the floor. 12 hours, man, that's a long shift. And he was whistling. I was so surprised. And he said, no, we're all full of germs and viruses here. Go home. We're safe.